Hello and welcome to Analysis with me, John Rees. 150 people lost their lives in an attack by extremist group Boko Haram on a Nigerian village yesterday, according to the Nigerian media. Meanwhile, the Nigerian government continues their search for over 250 schoolgirls kidnapped by the group last month. The issue has been taken up in a global social media campaign. The British government has offered to send SAS troops and other military hardware to assist Nigeria's president, Goodluck Jonathan, in defeating the fighters. But amidst the outrage at the abduction of the schoolgirls, do we really know anything about Boko Haram? How many know of the long war with the Nigerian government and the accusations that it has extrajudicially killed Boko Haram militants? Why has the Nigerian government failed to defeat them? Well, joining me in the studio to discuss all this are Lindsay German, convener of the Stop the War Coalition, and Lagun Ekenole, who's a Nigerian analyst at the Think Africa Press, and Lohaisi Kinshasa, who's Secretary General of the African Socialist International. Well, welcome to you all. But first, let's have a look at this report.
Attackers in northern Nigeria have killed up to 300 people as the UK sends a team of experts to help the hunt for the 200 abducted schoolgirls. Last month, Boko Haram militants stormed an all-girls secondary school in the village of Chibok in Nigeria's northeast. The teenagers were packed onto trucks and disappeared into a remote area along the border with Cameroon. In a recent video, a member of the organization threatened they would sell the girls on the black market.
Just because I took some little girls in Western education, everybody is making noise. Let me tell you, I took the girls. Girls, go ahead and get married. We are against Western education, and I say stop Western education. I repeat, I took the girls and I will sell them off. There is a market for selling girls.
Boko Haram was created in 2002 in Maiduguri, the capital of the northeast state of Borno. Before 2009, the group did not aim to violently overthrow the government. Violent clashes between Christians and Muslims and harsh government treatment, including pervasive police brutality, encouraged the group's radicalization. Boko Haram's hundreds of followers consist largely of impoverished northern Islamic students and clerics, as well as professionals, many of whom are unemployed. The kidnapping has sparked mass demonstrations across Nigeria and in many parts of the world. The protesters condemned the inaction of President Goodluck, who for decades has vowed to put an end to the killings and abductions with very little success. US President Barack Obama said he hoped this will be a wake-up call for the world to tackle these organizations.
We've always identified them as one of the worst local or regional terrorist organizations there is out there. But I can only imagine what the parents are going through. So what we've done is we have offered, and it's been accepted, help from our military and law enforcement officials. We're going to do everything we can to provide assistance to them. In the short term, our goal obviously is to help the international community and the Nigerian government as a team to do everything we can to recover these young ladies. But we're also going to have to deal with the broader problem of organizations like this that can cause such havoc in people's day-to-day lives.
A number of anti-war groups have raised the alarm on the rhetoric emerging from the kidnapping and have warned of the dangers of a new Afghanistan. As the world holds its breath for the safe return of the missing schoolgirls, many have raised concerns about what will happen in the aftermath of this terrible attack. Flaminia Jambalvo, Islam Channel.
Okay, so Lindsay, there's been a widespread reaction, including an absolutely huge social media campaign about the return of the schoolgirls, and now we've seen, as this clip showed, Barack Obama and David Cameron in his country talking about military aid. How do you see those? How do you unpick that story?
Well, I think the story is a horrific story. That the idea that these girls have been kidnapped, that there's several hundred of them, that more have been kidnapped since the original, and that this has been a process that's been going on for a long time, I think has really shocked people around the world. But I think the problem with it is that we need to, and I think particularly because the whole question of education, and people feel very strongly that girls should have the right to have an education wherever they are in the world. But I think that we have to look at the wider questions here, because we've heard this narrative before many, many times, that there are these terrible atrocities that women in particular are suffering, and that what can we do, the we being the Western we. Well, there's a long history here, and perhaps we ought to think about what we have done in the past that may not have worked so well. But I think very much when you look at the history of military intervention, particularly if you look at Afghanistan, for example, this was exactly the story which was told us 13 years ago. Actually, today, after 13 years of invasion, occupation, the situation of women is, what, the second worst in the world? Forced marriage, rape, all sorts of terrible situations. So I think we have to look at other solutions rather than just the knee-jerk, let's send in the SAS. I mean, SAS and women's liberation don't really go together in my mind.
Again, I mean, we'll come on to the kind of, you know, the background to Boko Haram in Nigeria in a moment. But what do you make of the way in which Obama and Cameron have reacted to what was a popular campaign about this issue? What do you think of their responses?
I think when you go to the issue itself, you begin to understand that the world is catching on, the media is catching on, everyone is understanding that, okay, in Nigeria there is an issue concerning these missing girls. It's tragic, and the pain that people feel is being felt widely. At the same time, you expect Barack Obama and the leaders of the world to contribute to it. I wouldn't refer to Nigeria as being as an Afghanistan state, because it's not Taliban-like, there still is a functioning government, but they've been overwhelmed by this insurgency, and I think they've come to the realization that they need help from governments who have expertise to tackle issues along these lines. So at the same time, I'm for it, because it seems to me that it's gotten out of hand and help is definitely needed. But at the same time, I do have the innate belief that, as Barack Obama said, as a team, that Boko Haram can be challenged and the girls can be returned.
Louise, and where do you stand on this? Because, you know, I mean, that's two very different points of view. I mean, there's a point of view that every time the Western powers arrive, it's like bringing a blowtorch to put out a fire. There's the view that Lugan's just expressed, that the Nigerian government need help.
Well, first of all, we have to say what's happening there is the failure of the Nigerian government or neo-colonial system that is in place that has not been taking care of the needs of the people. And to expect the US government, the British government, or the French governments to come and rescue the situation is like someone who's suffering from malaria asking a mosquito to come for help. And we don't believe that. In fact, if the US is going there, they're going there to rescue not the people of Nigeria. They will go there to rescue neo-colonialism itself that is in crisis, is collapsing. That's why the US will go there. And the US is facing serious challenge in Africa, the challenge from China and other new emerging powers. That's what the US is going there. They're not going to take care of our people. No, that's just impossible. They're not there to sort out, to help our people. Definitely not.
Yep. Again, I mean, what do you say to that? 'Cause I mean, we have been here before.
Yeah,
you know,
of course.
The cause is always noble, but it isn't necessarily the reason that they're going there.
I've researched and looked into the situation quite a lot, and I understand what my friend on the right is saying, but at the same time, they're not sending thousands of troops, hundreds of troops. David Cameron has agreed to send specialists and people who can help with the technical aspects of things. Barack Obama has said that he'll give assistance. It's not pull up a frigate or a ship, send F-16s in. It's more of how can we help the Nigerian government in areas that they don't seem to have expertise in, which I am for. But at the same time, I am still keeping both eyes open to the angles of, you know, neo-colonialism and bringing troops on the ground to take over Nigeria. I don't think that's the case. I think that, as you can see, they have a lot of respect for Nigeria. So it's not a situation where it's like Somalia or where it's like countries who are incapable of governing themselves. This is an insurgency that has grown, that has taken over vast areas of northern Nigeria, and any help that they can give in terms of technical assistance, I am for.
But, I mean, I suppose my worry about that, I think you're absolutely right. You're not talking about a major invasion, and you're not talking about a country which is the same as Afghanistan or the same kind of conflict. But it does seem to me that Nigeria is now what the major economy in Africa.
Yeah.
It spends billions and billions of pounds on its army. It has huge natural resources, which obviously are of interest, as we know, to Western companies and Western governments. It seems to me that, firstly, it is a lack of kind of political will rather than military hardware that they can't deal with this question, and that secondly, the reasons for the talk about special forces and so on, firstly, can be very much the beginning of an intervention, as we've seen in many, many wars over the years, but secondly, is very much about the other resources that there are there.
Louise, I mean, I think often in the Western coverage of this, some of those points about the wealth of the country aren't properly understood. It's not, as you were saying, it's not Somalia. And one Council for Foreign Relations report on Nigeria recently said that the Nigerian state is a kind of elite club where they divide up the wealth in the society. Now, that may not be a broken state, but it is a state that's more or less bound to produce friction and division, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I said in the beginning. What's happening in Nigeria is the result of the failure of the system that is in place. That system was not put in place to satisfy the needs of the people. It was there to maintain the economy that was there before, produce oil and other things for Europe, America, and other places. And as a result, the people have nothing. There is no Nigerian economy that is based on satisfying the needs of the people. That's why I don't call that Nigerian economy. It's still European or US or Japan or even economy. It has nothing to do with the people. That's why that's how Boko Haram was able to grow and flourish as it's happening now. And to call for US and the British so-called experts to go there, people forget that the Nigerian army is trained by who? By the British and the US. So they have been there all the time. So this idea that they're coming to do something new, I can't believe that. But what I can see is that imperialism is in crisis. And this crisis is deeper than they expected. And not only is deeper than expected, they can see a serious challenge, as I said earlier, from China, Brazil, and other new powers. Our message is that the people need to organize against the neo-colonial governments, also against the Boko Haram, because both of them, they use violence against the people. There is no liberation violence that's coming there. And also, of course, against imperialism in the face of US or British or whatsoever. Yeah.
I mean that's a viable alternative perspective, isn't it? Well, let me ask you this. First of all, do you accept that analysis by the Council for Foreign Relations, which says that basically this state is about dividing up the wealth among the elite, and it doesn't really provide for the people? And if that's true, then that kind of perspective it might be better than foreign intervention.
It's an argument that everyone has. It's a conversation that everyone likes to involve themselves in. And obviously, to be honest, I must say that there are challenges at the top, but the issue is multi-layered. Corruption has eaten at the moral fabric of the country. And it has been for such a while now. It's not a 5-year problem. It's a problem going pre-independence. If you look at the 50s and the 60s, when corruption, after the Civil War, when it grew. So we're at a stage where it's a hybrid version where there is a clique who maintains power. There are people in government who are how do I say, as they say, eating the government's money. But yet at the same time, there actually are people on the ground who have hope for a better Nigeria, who are trying behind the scenes, who don't get as much coverage as they should. The issue, as I said before, is multi-layered in reference to corruption and Boko Haram. There's a very big linkage, lack of opportunities, lack of commitment to the One Nigeria project. And once you look at that, there's the economic issue, there's poverty, there's politics. And it all meshes into a bowl that's created a situation that has come to this.
So, Lindsay, I mean, there's a certain amount of agreement about what Nigerian society looks like. I mean, in previous cases where the West has intervened or continues to intervene in the way that Louise was pointing out, it tends to draw the dividing line in the society between the government, which is getting the aid, which are the good guys, and these, absolutely awful people, and therefore a corrupt elite gets the the stamp of approval from the West, and this worsens the situation. Is that one of the dangers that you think might occur here?
Well, I think it's very, very likely that that will be the case, because if you look at the situation with Boko Haram, there clearly are all sorts of grievances in that part of Nigeria. There clearly have been all sorts of clashes. It didn't start out as anywhere near as violent as this, and in some reports I've read, that one of the reasons for taking the girls is that there have been female relatives of Boko Haram who've been detained by the police and so on. So there's a very, very complex question there. But yes, I think in general, the record of the US and of the EU in a whole number of countries has been to support governments who tend to support their priorities, regardless of questions of democracy, human rights, and all those wider questions which they now use as a means for intervention. I mean, I'd also say we did have the bombing of Libya only, 3 years ago now, and a number of problems in North and West Africa are very much connected to what happened as a result of that, if you look at what's been going on since then.
I mean, Louise, you were saying, that the ordinary people in Nigeria face at least two enemies, a corrupt elite in charge of the state, Boko Haram, and that they need to organise against them. But why hasn't there been more organisation of people in resistance, or has there, and we're just not hearing about it?
Yes, we have to see things in that perspective. That what's happening in Nigeria is influenced by what's happening in other places. For example, there was a leadership that could have an impact in Nigeria. Outside Nigeria, for example, Kwame Nkrumah could have had an impact on that, because he wanted to unify Africa, and so is people like Lumumba, so is people like Malcolm X, in the US, people like that. So what people need to understand that the struggle for genuine happiness in Africa or in African nation has been militarily defeated, particularly by the assassination of Lumumba, overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah, the assassination of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, people like that. Overall, in Nigeria, I don't know very well the local setup, but what we know, that had an impact. And also the consolidation of the Nigerian state. It was consolidated as a force against anyone who opposes the neocolonial government, anyone who opposes the fact that Nigeria is an oppressed nation. I'll take an example of Ken Saro-Wiwa, for example. He was a freedom fighter, and he was murdered all along, many other people. And we didn't hear the U.S. government
specifically, they were raising questions about the oil contracts.
Yes, and we didn't hear from the British government or the French government, the U.S. government, saying that we need help to free Ken Saro-Wiwa, but they could have done something, but they didn't. So the fundamental question is that the people have been militarily crushed. And what's happening now is a revival of the people coming back to political life. But what the people don't have is an independent organization that can channel the energy, towards the real target, which is parasitic capitalism or imperialism, which is also the neocolonial government is in place, and also various level of, as you say, macho layers, which means to me, all kind of opportunists who are not concerned about the plight of the people, but to use the plight of the people to get a cut off the cake for themselves. That's how many people are also joining this bandwagon. They're not concerned about the real issues, and that's what we're saying. What needs to happen is really a call for a revolution in Nigeria. That's the bottom line. No revolution in Nigeria, no revolution in Africa. Africa will never change until there's a revolution, which means the people coming to power on their own terms.
Look, and we'll get on to the sort of the background to the growth of Boko Haram and how it's changed in the second part of the programme. But just before we reach the break, there have been accusations about the First Lady ordering kidnapping of Boko Haram people. Do you put any weight on those reports? Do you see that there's? Do you agree that there's a kind of malign sort of influence between the regime and Boko Haram developing?
I heard reports of the First Lady interfering in high-level issues on numerous occasions. It seems that she holds more power than the average First Lady should, but going back to the days of Babangida, the days of Abacha, the First Lady has always held sway. I think even though the office isn't in the Constitution, because of the role that the First Lady plays in different nations, she ends up being a conduit of power. She ends up being something bigger than what she really should. And personally, I'm very against that for the sheer reason that the Nigerian people must look up to the president. They must look up to people who can actually do things for them. The arrests, I'm not for them at all. The protests that happened...
Just to be clear, do you think that those reports are correct, that she has in fact been ordering...
The dissemination of information from Nigeria to here, bear in mind, passes through many hands. Personally, I wouldn't put it past someone in that position to go about doing things like that, if I'm to be honest. But at the same time, you can't take these various reports from Nigerian, like small media enterprises, blogs, X, Y, and Z. It's like Chinese whispers, but I know that something has gone on at a certain level in which she has overstepped her power, yes.
OK, well, I think we're going to have to leave it for this part of the programme just there, but we will be returning in the second part to look at the background to Boko Haram, where it originated from, how it's changed, and its relationship with the Nigerian state. So that's after the break. Do rejoin us.